Once a giant, always a giant. For me, it's only a giant.
All right, so we got two former Giants who were overly concerned with what we're doing here as the New York Football Giants. We got two guys who must miss being here because it seems like they keep a very, very close eye on what the Giants are doing, what games they're winning, what games they're losing. And the first guy up is Wink Martindale. Wink Martindale is getting interviewed by Michigan reporters over there in Ann Arbor, Michigan. He's over there getting interviewed. He's talking about his team that is 5-4 this year. That he's the defensive coordinator of, and they're 5-4, and they're getting blown out by the ranked teams in the college football. They're getting blown out. They're getting blown off the field. They're getting outclassed. They're getting outcoached. And he says, I love the players that I coach. All these guys work hard, blah, 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 blah. Coach talking, I'm like, okay, regular stuff. And he says, obviously, it's a different game. This is something that he glazes over because it is a different game. But he says, but it's a lot better than being in some places that are 2-7. And I'm thinking, why did he feel that he should mention what we're doing? Why should he mention what we're doing when, again, you're 5-4? Your defense against ranked teams is giving up an average of 34, 35 points. You've given up 31 to Texas. You gave up 38 to Oregon. You got blown off the field both times. Your players weren't ready to go. You got outcoached. You got outplayed. And after a loss to Oregon, this is what he has to say. This is what he has to say. He's worrying about what the Giants are doing in an entirely different league, an entirely different sport, pretty much. He's worried about what they're doing. So it just says a lot about Wink Martindale. I was a guy who was kind of like, he can't get along with Daboll. That's fine. He just can't get along with him. But the fact that he's still talking about it just makes me think maybe this dude really was in that job. Maybe the stuff of him not getting along with John Harbaugh were true. Maybe, he just couldn't get along with him because he's kind of different. He's kind of crazy. He apparently cussed out Brian Daboll, stormed out, walked out of the building, and just didn't come back. I mean, who does that? A grown man with gray hair and a gray beard? He just gets up and just walks out like Santa Claus walking out on Christmas. He's just a grown man, just gets up and just walks off of the job. I mean, those are things that you see like 20-year-olds do, 16-year-olds do. Like they walk out of the Burger King and say like, I'm not flipping any more burgers. Like they hand Evan Neal the apron and they're like, I'm not flipping any more burgers. This is too much. I'm gone. And that's what Wink Martindale did. He said, peace. And I said, fine, let him go. Let him go. I think he's a talented, very, very intelligent defensive coordinator, but he definitely was not irreplaceable because if you look at the Giants defense, there were nothing really to sneeze at. He talked about all his blitzes. They sometimes, were really effective and sometimes they weren't. But, I wish them all the best. But almost a year later, you're talking about the Giants. Why? What did we do to you? Now, this is probably a personal thing with Daboll, but Giants fans don't really deserve you talking about us like that. We did nothing but support Wink Martindale the entire time. So another thing. So that kind of makes me think like Brian Daboll, a little bit of a yellow flag, that Wink is still bringing us up. I mean, part of it is like, yeah, Wink has definitely got a couple of screws loose, but also I'm also thinking about Brian Daboll and does he have an issue, maintaining good relationships with his assistant coaches? Because you got Mike Kafka, who's kind of phased out. I mean, he's phased out of the offense. He's not really calling plays anymore. He is demoralized every time they ask him about, offensive coordinator duties and everything like that and what he does. He looks completely out of it. And he got Wink Martindale almost a year later talking about, what we're doing. So it's really interesting from that perspective. And it's just something, again, that I just kind of check off and say, like, maybe this is something that I should be paying attention to when it comes to Brian Daboll. And speaking of Brian Daboll's coaches, another coach, Bobby Johnson, who's now down in Washington, who has been like the ultimate scapegoat for all of the Giants fans' problems. He was the ultimate scapegoat. The offensive line doesn't work. Bobby Johnson is a war criminal. All of that stuff. You know, everybody hates Bobby Johnson. And he goes down to Washington, and they start off looking horrible. And then a couple of weeks later, all of a sudden, Washington, they're pass protecting. They're running the ball. The Giants have the number one pass rush as far as win rate, as far as sacks, as far as everything. The Giants come into this game the number one pass rushing team. And they leave out of this game with no sacks. So obviously Washington's offensive line is playing pretty well. So Bobby Johnson seems like he was right. And in the meantime, Jonathan Feliciano, I mean, you know, they call him Mongo or Dirtbag, the former Giant who played on that line last year. He goes on to Twitter and he says, crazy, Washington is 7-2 with that poopy offensive line coach, you know, double eye emoji. So, and then he @s Giants Twitter. And it's just like, why are people so obsessed with this football team on our worst days? On our worst days, it seems like people are coming back to dance on people's graves. So it shows that, first off, people are upset with Daboll. Wink Martindale is upset with Daboll, and Jonathan Feliciano is upset with Giants Twitter. So it just shows you that these players definitely are paying attention to what's happening on Twitter. And it seems like Bobby Johnson wasn't as bad as we thought, because guess what? You know, we were really giving our new offensive line coach a lot of props. You know, he came in, Carm came in here, and, you know, the offensive line was playing lights out football. Then Andrew Thomas gets hurt. They look just as bad. So it just goes to show you that, listen, if you have a tackle that can't pass protect on one side, like we did last year on the other side, it doesn't matter who your offensive line coach is. Doesn't matter who your offensive line coach is. They will always underachieve. And this isn't to excuse the job that Bobby Johnson did. I wouldn't say he was a world beater here, but Jonathan Feliciano came to defend him. And it's just Feliciano, another guy who's probably playing better football than he was when he played here, is just balling out. So it just shows, you know, everybody hates the Giants. Everybody wants us to fail. And is it a Daboll thing? Is this a Shane thing? Is this just a Giants fan thing? Is this a New York sports thing? We'll never know. But what a time it is. What a time it is right now to be a Giants fan. Everybody is relishing our defeat, our downfall, and something's got to change. Something has absolutely got to change. And if you're interested in finding out what a little glimmer of hope we could possibly have, check out this video I just put out on Theo Johnson yesterday.